Hi everybody, so welcome back to another vlog, a little sooner than I thought. I'm going to have you keep me company while I divvy up some prokinetics. If you guys have watched my SIBO mistake video about prokinetics, you know that the thing that I do personally in my clinic is I have people try a whole bunch of different prokinetics. I do not pretend to know which prokinetic is right for each individual person. I've noticed that when I made attempts at doing that, I was actually pretty bad at it. And I think that most clinicians and most individuals are probably pretty bad at that because, as far as I can tell, there's no clear pattern. But anyway, I'm just divvying up a couple. This one is actually a new kid on the block. It's MegaGuard from Microbiome Labs. It's the company that makes Megaspore probiotic. And they are claiming some prokinetic-ish sounding stuff. So I decided to put it to the test. I'm going to throw it into the mix and have a couple people try it. But while I'm working on this front, I thought I would just take a few minutes and respond to somebody on my previous vlog who asked me, am I sure that I had Lyme disease? Like, is it possible that it was just mold-related illness? And they asked what was my MMP9 and I think my MSH. So I would say the following, and I don't mean to single out this individual, it's just I have very recently discovered that it's actually way easier for me to vlog and respond to things in an informal fashion like this than it is to make like really official videos and write comments. So yes, I am absolutely 100% sure that I have Lyme disease. And it's funny that you say that because there is a totally worthwhile movement regarding the realization that a lot of people who think they have Lyme disease in fact do not. And how particularly so-called chronic Lyme disease may be overdiagnosed. Now, if you're a Lyme person, don't, freak out and think that I'm like a Lyme denier. I'm not. But I have seen that before. I have seen patients in my office come to me for chronic Lyme disease. And then for various reasons, we are led to believe that it was actually mold-related illness, other biotoxins, or that there's more to it than just the persistence of an infection. So to that person, and I'm going to link this in my comment back to them, yeah, I totally understand why you're asking me that, and it is a great question to ask. For me as an individual, I'm 100% sure I had Lyme. The condensed version of the story is I'm actually a Yankee transplant. I am not a Southerner by nature. I live in the South now, but when I was a kid, I grew up in upstate New York, outside of the Ithaca area, and my family is all New Englanders. So my mom's side of the family is all still to this day in Connecticut, and my dad's side of the family was predominantly in Maine. And we would go back all the time. So we were kind of the lone wolves out in Ithaca, and we were not close to any family really. Everybody was back in Maine, Massachusetts, or Connecticut. And we would go back frequently, like monthly, to see family. It was about a 5.5 hour drive, so it was enough that it was a moderate pain in the butt, but it was close enough that we could do it probably about once a month. And hold on. Sorry, that's the price of doing the vlogs because every now and then I have to actually use my brain. So anyhow, when I was about 14, I went to go visit my grandparents in East Haddam, Connecticut, which is the town next door to Lyme, Connecticut, the town where the disease was first discovered, and they collected the ticks and they did all of the initial research. And it is a total hotbed for the stuff. As a matter of fact, my grandfather's property, which he had about 80-something acres, my grandfather's property was used in the 70s and 80s to collect ticks for Lyme disease research at Yale University. They would come with white sheets, apparently, and they would drag white sheets through the forest on my grandfather's property, and they would collect ticks and then bring them back to the lab for testing and analysis. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Anyhow, so when I was 14, I went to Connecticut to help take care of my grandparents. My grandmother by that point was legally blind and had the beginnings of dementia, diabetes, and all sorts of stuff. And my grandfather was, doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, all her caretaking, bathing her, you name it, he was doing everything. So as far back as I can remember, practically, I used to go with them to doctor's appointments, and I used to try to help. So I spent a large portion of my summer vacation that year. For about a month or a month and a half, I went to Camp Gronbach, as it's called, which was AKA my grandparents' house on the Gronbach side. And I went there and I helped take care of my grandma. But I was also running outside and playing in the woods, a very wooded area of Connecticut, with all of my boy cousins. And we would get into trouble, and we would be frolicking in the woods for weeks on end. Like every day I was outside and I was taking care of my grandma. So when I came home, right before this, it was the summer right before ninth grade, and I came home and I had flu-like symptoms in August. And my parents, being New Englanders, kind of knew. Like, they were like, okay, this is weird. So my mom said, Steve, my dad, she said, Steve, take her to the pediatrician. It must be Lyme disease. Get her on some, doxycycline. Get her started on treatment. Get her tested. Well, my doctor at the time, for whatever reason, even, this was 1999 or 2000, one or the other. Even at the time, they weren't, like conventional medicine, they weren't super hip with Lyme. For whatever reason, even, 5.5 hours away in New York. So my pediatrician, in all of his infinite wisdom, decided to give me the Lyme disease vaccine without testing me for Lyme disease, which, spoiler alert, I had Lyme disease at the time. So that was a very bad idea. And I just remember the progression of it. I had flu-like symptoms, malaise, aches and pains, and it progressed from that. And then I remember one day, it was like the first week of ninth grade, I had Bell's palsy. I started realizing that half of my face wasn't working. And I remember telling my friends, it was like, I think I have to go to the nurse, guys. And probably really freaked out that poor high school nurse. But I had full-blown Bell's palsy. My mom had to find an infectious disease specialist. And I started off ninth grade with a spinal tap. And it's actually neat. So I'm looking at my computer screen. I'm not like staring into the distance right now. So I have been on a little bit of a quest more recently to just acquire some medical records, because I have a long and assorted weird medical history. And it started because my current ear, nose, throat doctor got some records from my previous ear, nose, throat doctors when I was a kid. And I was like, these records are like 30 years old. How do they still have these? This is amazing. So I'm kind of on this hunt, and I decided to reach out. The guy who treated me for Lyme disease when I was 14 is still in practice in Ithaca, New York. And I reached out to his office, and lo and behold, they still had all of my tests, all of my charts. So for example, here I'm looking at, I'm not going to show you, but I'm looking at my Western blot. And actually, can I do that? Can I turn it around? No, I just took a picture of myself. That's worthless. So anyway, looking at my test results. So it's the Western blot, and that's notoriously inaccurate and has a lot of false negatives. Literally every single band, present, 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 every single one of them. And at the top, positive test result. Scrolling down, there was some IgM. So that was all IgG. The IgMs, present, 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 positive. And then what was fascinating to get this back, because I'm just kind of a dork, was they did a pretty cool test, and they looked for Borrelia burgdorferi, IgG and IgM antibodies in my cerebrospinal fluid. So I had a spinal tap beginning of ninth grade because of this. And lo and behold, let's see, where is it? Yes, Borrelia IgG antibodies, positive, central nervous system, IgG, and IgM, so cerebral spinal fluid, IgM, everything is through the roof. Like, IgM in the CSF should be below 0.1, and mine was 8.6. Total IgM, Borrelia-specific IgG, basically all of the antibodies in the cerebrospinal fluid were lit up like a Christmas tree. So anyway, so that's how I started ninth grade, actually. And it went from, hey, I feel like crap, to, hey, I'm having double vision and headaches and, half of my face isn't working. And I'm just really, really glad that that guy was in practice in Ithaca, New York, and that my mom found him in the days before the internet. It's not like she was going on Facebook groups or Google or YouTube, for that matter, and finding this guy. Like, she just did some pretty gnarly detective work on her own and found this infectious disease pediatrician guy. But I'm so grateful that we found him, and it just boggles my mind that he's still in practice in Ithaca, New York, because he treated me for Lyme 20 years ago. And I'm even more astounded that he had my records. But anyway, so that was a really long-winded version of my response to this person who probably didn't anticipate getting such a long-winded response. So I guess in summary, I totally get why you're asking me that. I think that there are plenty of people who believe they have Lyme disease and they actually do not. And they've been led to believe that incorrectly by clinicians or the internet or both. But I am one of the cases where I most definitely had Lyme disease. And to kind of wrap up, one more kind of funny point that I almost forgot about. So there's this guy. He's an MD. He practices with and researches with Dr. Shoemaker, who is he's like the guy in the mold world. And I got the privilege to see him speak at a conference in June this past year. And his presentation was absolutely phenomenal. And after the presentation, a whole bunch of us dweebs were following him around and taking notes. And it's super relevant for me because I live in North Carolina, and there is such a high incidence of mold-related illness in North Carolina because of the humidity. So a bunch of us were following him around for like an hour after his presentation, and we were just writing down everything he was saying. And he was talking about some neurological stuff and some mitochondria stuff, and he was talking about stuff that rang some bells for me, because he was talking about Lyme disease and chronic mold illness, both, and how they're related and how they're different. And he made the point of saying that a lot of people believe that they have Lyme when in actuality they don't. And I asked him, I said, hey, can I be kind of totally selfish and ask you, I had a very bad case of Lyme when I was 14, and I was asking him some personal medical questions regarding that and whether or not it would be potentially worth my while to pursue a particular type of therapy that he had talked about. And the first comment out of his mouth was, well, are you sure you had Lyme? And I had to chuckle. So it's not just you, poor person of the internet, who now I've dedicated 13 minutes of video to. The guy himself, like the guy who researches with Shoemaker and is one of the leading experts in mold and Lyme disease. First thing out of his mouth, he said, are you sure you had Lyme? To which I chuckled and told him basically the very condensed version of the story I just told you. Yes, I am 100% sure I had Lyme. And I actually was so glad that I had my old records to go back and look at that and say, without a shadow of a doubt, I know I had Lyme disease. So that is my story. And with that, I'm actually almost done putting all of my prokinetics in containers. It probably takes me longer to do these mundane tasks when I'm multitasking and talking to you guys, but it is an awful fun way to pass the time instead of just jamming out to Moana and Tangled and Frozen music for the umpteenth time. I have a 4-year-old, don't judge. I'll try to sneak in more of these vlogs, but yeah, I don't know if anybody else wanted to know my Lyme story, but now you have my Lyme story. For the record, I do not claim that I treat Lyme. Lyme is in the category of, I would rather it be handled by an MD or a DO or somebody who can prescribe when necessary. The folks that I work with for Lyme disease we are typically working on the autoimmune and the inflammatory consequences that resulted from a previous infection. But if I have any reason to suspect that somebody has a genuine persistent infection, I'm not your guy, gal, whatever. So I would clarify that. So if any of you are thinking, "Ooh boy, I'm going to work with her on Lyme disease," I have personal experience with Lyme, and I have very close personal family experience with mold-related illness, and that is a big thing. But I don't necessarily work with Lyme disease. Certainly not acute, and chronic. It really just depends on the case. But yeah, that's my Lyme story for whatever it's worth. Thank you for tuning in. And with that, my bagging up of my prokinetics is done for the day. So I'm going to let you guys go.